The first time I stepped into the Calloway mansion, I made sure I looked smaller than I was. Not physically. Strategically. My dress was soft beige, simple cut. No designer label visible. My hair was tied back neatly. No diamonds. No luxury watch. Just a delicate silver bracelet that looked almost sentimental. I wanted them to see a girl who didn't belong in rooms with crystal chandeliers and imported marble floors. And they did. The house itself felt like a statement, wealth dripping from every polished surface. The air even smelled expensive. Daniel squeezed my hand gently, unaware of the quiet storm inside me. He thought I was nervous about meeting his family. I wasn't nervous. I was observing. His mother greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The kind of smile reserved for charity events. Polite. Controlled. Evaluating. His sister's gaze traveled from my shoes upward, slow and deliberate, as if calculating my worth by fabric quality alone. "Welcome," his mother said sweetly. "Daniel has told us so little about you." That wasn't accidental. I kept my voice soft. "I'm just happy to finally meet everyone." Just. That word did a lot of work. They relaxed almost immediately. You could see it in their shoulders, in the way they exchanged quick glances. Relief. Approval. Maybe even amusement. They thought they understood me. A modest background. A simple education. A sweet girl lucky enough to marry into privilege. They had no idea I had chosen every detail of this performance. Because sometimes the only way to see people clearly is to let them believe you're beneath them. And that night, as I stepped fully into their world, I already knew one thing for sure. I wasn't the one being tested. They were. The dining room looked like something out of a luxury magazine. A chandelier sparkled above a table long enough to separate power from vulnerability. 12 chairs. Only 6 of us seated. The emptiness somehow made it more intimidating. Daniel pulled my chair out for me, smiling softly. He thought I was nervous. I wasn't. I was studying the battlefield. His mother sat at the head of the table, posture perfect, pearls resting against her collarbone like a symbol of inherited authority. His father unfolded his napkin with slow precision. His sister, Victoria, leaned back slightly, watching me the way someone watches a contestant on a reality show, waiting for a mistake. The first course arrived. Silence followed. Then it began. "So," his mother said lightly, swirling her wine, "tell us about your family." I lowered my eyes modestly. "My father runs a small business." "True. Just not small in the way they imagined." "And your mother?" Victoria asked. "She prefers to stay out of the spotlight." "Also true. My mother had built 3 companies and avoided press interviews for years." His father gave a thin smile. "And what do you do?" "I studied finance." "Oh," Victoria replied quickly, almost surprised. "At which school?" "State University." I watched the flicker in her eyes. Not impressed. They heard ordinary. They saw unpolished. They assumed limited. Daniel reached for my hand under the table, a quiet gesture of support. He didn't notice the subtle exchange of looks between his parents. A silent conversation that said, "She's sweet, but not strategic." Dessert arrived, rich and unnecessary. His mother leaned slightly toward me. Daniel has always been drawn to kind hearts. The pause between her words carried weight. I smiled softly. That's one of the reasons I admire him. Kindness disarms people. And they were completely disarmed. By the end of dinner, they believed they had measured me. They thought they knew exactly what I brought to the table. They didn't realize I owned half the table. And as I thanked them politely and walked out of that room, one thought settled calmly in my mind. Underestimation is a powerful gift. And they had just handed it to me. The following weekend, Daniel's mother invited me out for what she called a little bonding time. Her driver picked me up precisely at 11. The car alone probably cost more than most apartments downtown. I stepped inside wearing another carefully chosen outfit. Simple blouse, modest heels, minimal makeup. Harmless. Unthreatening. We arrived at one of the most exclusive shopping districts in the city. "This is where we usually shop," she said gently, as if explaining something to a tourist. Usually, inside the boutique, everything gleamed: glass shelves, polished marble floors, handbags displayed like museum artifacts. A sales associate greeted her by name. Of course. She picked up a structured leather bag. Isn't this stunning? Limited edition. It's beautiful, I replied honestly. She glanced at me. It's around 5,000. Not everyone understands the craftsmanship behind pieces like this. There it was. Not direct. Not rude. Just precise. I nodded. Quality is important. She smiled thinly. Daniel is used to a certain lifestyle. Travel. Private events. Investments. It can be overwhelming for someone unfamiliar. Unfamiliar. I looked at the handbag again, turning it slightly in my hand. I adapt quickly. She chuckled softly, misunderstanding my confidence for innocence. That's good. Marriage requires adjustment. If she only knew. The irony was almost amusing. Just 2 months earlier, my firm had quietly acquired minority shares in a luxury retail chain, including this very brand. I could have bought the entire display without checking my balance, but I didn't. Instead, I set the bag back gently. It's lovely, I said, but I prefer something practical. Her eyebrows lifted, mild disapproval disguised as politeness. As we left the store, she added casually, Daniel has always been generous. He takes care of the people he loves. Translation? He will be the provider. I smiled warmly. That's admirable. Because the truth was simple. I didn't need Daniel's money. And I certainly didn't need his family's approval. But I did need something else. To see how far they would go when they believed I had nothing. And judging by that afternoon, they were just getting started. It happened by accident. Or maybe fate wanted me to hear it. I had gone back to the Callaway mansion one evening to drop off a folder Daniel had forgotten in my car. The house was unusually quiet. Staff moved softly through the halls. The air felt tense. As I walked past his father's study, I heard my name. I paused. The door wasn't fully closed. Daniel, his father's voice was firm, controlled. Marriage is not just romance. It's positioning. There was a silence before Daniel responded. What's that supposed to mean? It means, his father continued, you are the future of this company. The woman you choose should strengthen that. Strengthen. I stood still, my hand tightening around the folder. She's intelligent, Daniel said defensively. And I love her. His mother's voice joined in, smoother but sharper. We're not questioning your feelings. We're questioning suitability. There it was again. Suitability. She doesn't come from influence, his father added. No visible connections. No strategic value. Strategic value. The words were clinical, cold, as if they were discussing a merger instead of a human being. I could have walked in. I could have defended myself. Instead, I listened. Daniel sounded frustrated now. You don't even know her. That's exactly the problem, his mother replied. A soft scoff followed. She seems pleasant, but pleasant doesn't build empires. I felt something shift inside me then. Not anger. Clarity. They weren't cruel for sport. They were transactional. Every relationship filtered through power and leverage. Even love. And in that moment, I understood something important. They weren't underestimating me because I seemed kind. They were underestimating me because they saw no advantage. Which meant I had done my job perfectly. I stepped away quietly before they could discover me standing there. By the time Daniel came out of the study later, I was in the living room, smiling softly, flipping through a magazine. Everything okay? He asked. Of course, I replied gently. And I meant it. Because the more invisible they believed I was, the more honest they became. And the more honest they became, the closer I got to knowing exactly how this game would end. The truth revealed itself in numbers. It always does. A few days after that conversation outside the study, I was sitting in my private office downtown, a space Daniel had never seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Minimalist design. Quiet authority. The complete opposite of the mansion's loud display of wealth. My CFO stood across from me, tablet in hand. "The Callaway Group's liquidity position is worse than public reports suggest," he said calmly. "They're over-leveraged. 2 major projects are delayed. If the next funding round fails, they'll collapse within 6 months." I nodded slowly. Collapse. The empire that judged me for lacking strategic value was standing on unstable ground. "Who else knows?" I asked. "Only core investors. They're looking for emergency capital." Quietly. Of course they were. Pride never allows powerful families to admit weakness openly. I leaned back in my chair, connecting pieces that suddenly fit too well. The tense atmosphere at dinner, the private discussions, the subtle pressure about suitability. They weren't just evaluating me. They were searching for leverage. Daniel's marriage could bring connections, influence, financial security, but they assumed I brought none. Ironically, my investment firm had already received a confidential proposal from their financial advisors. They didn't know who sat behind the holding company reviewing their documents. Me, the so-called naive girl from State University. I opened the digital file again, studying their projections. Inflated optimism, strategic omissions, desperation hidden beneath polished language. They needed a lifeline, and I held the rope. But here was the real question. Would I use it to punish them, or protect the man I loved? That night, Daniel called me. "My father's stressed," he admitted. "Business pressure." I kept my voice gentle. "I'm sure he'll handle it. If only he knew." As I ended the call, I looked out at the city's skyline, lights flickering like silent witnesses. They thought I was stepping into their world empty-handed. They didn't realize I already owned influence inside it. And now, for the first time, the game wasn't just about respect. It was about survival. Theirs. And possibly mine. The engagement party was exactly what I expected: extravagant, calculated, and designed to impress. The Callaway estate was glowing that evening. Strings of warm lights wrapped around the garden trees. A live quartet played near the fountain. Luxury cars lined the driveway like a silent parade of status. I arrived in a soft blush gown, elegant, but still modest compared to the glittering designer pieces surrounding me. I kept my jewelry minimal again. Let them stay comfortable in their assumptions. Daniel looked proud as he introduced me to guests. His mother, however, handled the official introductions. "This is our future daughter-in-law," she said with a polished smile. Daniel fell in love with her heart. There was a subtle emphasis on that word. Heart. Not background. Not influence. Not partnership. Just heart. A few guests gave me sympathetic smiles, the kind reserved for someone who married above her level. I noticed the whispers, the careful glances. But something else caught my attention. Across the garden, 3 men stood near the bar, men I knew very well. Senior members of my executive board. They were here under the invitation of one of the Callaway partners. They hadn't greeted me. Not yet. Professional boundaries. Daniel's father walked toward them with measured confidence, beginning what looked like a hopeful conversation. His posture was slightly different tonight, less dominant, more persuasive. He needed them. As champagne glasses clinked and congratulations flowed, I moved quietly through the crowd, listening. Snippets of conversation floated through the air. Expansion plans, bridge financing, confidential restructuring. So the rumors were true. At one point, Daniel's sister approached me with a thin smile. "It must be overwhelming. All this." "It's beautiful," I replied calmly. She tilted her head. "You'll get used to it." I almost smiled at the irony. As the night deepened, Daniel took the microphone to thank everyone. His speech was sincere, full of love and hope for our future. And as applause echoed through the garden, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just a party. It was a performance. They were showcasing stability, projecting power, hiding cracks beneath golden light. And the most dangerous part? The person who could expose those cracks was standing among them, pretending not to notice. They celebrated their future that night, unaware that the key to saving it, or ending it, was already wearing their family's engagement ring. 3 days after the engagement party, I received a formal invitation. Not from Daniel. From his father. Join me in my office tomorrow afternoon, the message read. There are practical matters to discuss. Practical. I knew exactly what that meant. The Callaway study felt different during the day, less dramatic than at night, but no less intimidating. Dark wood shelves lined with leather-bound books. Awards displayed like trophies of dominance. His father stood near the window when I entered, hands clasped behind his back. Please, he said, gesturing toward the chair across from his desk. I sat calmly. He slid a thick folder toward me. A prenuptial agreement, he explained, voice even. Standard procedure in families like ours. Like ours. I opened it slowly. The terms were aggressive. Every asset protected. Future earnings shielded. In the event of separation, I would walk away with almost nothing. Even intellectual property developed during marriage would remain strictly within their holdings. It wasn't protection. It was containment. I trust you understand, he continued smoothly. This isn't personal. It's responsible. I looked up at him. Of course. He seemed relieved by my tone. He had expected resistance, emotion, confusion. Instead, I turned the page. One clause caught my eye, a provision requiring me to waive any claim to shared investments made through affiliated entities. Affiliated entities. Interesting choice of words. He thought I wouldn't notice the language. I'd like my legal team to review this, I said gently. The shift in his expression was subtle, but real. Your legal team? He repeated. Yes. I believe in responsible decisions, too. For the first time since I had met him, he studied me more carefully. Not dismissively. Strategically. He had underestimated my awareness. I'm sure that won't be necessary, he began. It will, I replied softly. If we're building a future based on transparency. Silence filled the room. This wasn't about money for me. It was about balance. He nodded slowly. Very well. As I stood to leave, I sensed something had changed. A crack in their certainty. They still believed I was harmless. But now, they weren't entirely sure. And doubt, in powerful families, spreads faster than fear. They had handed me a contract designed to protect their empire. They didn't realize it had just revealed how fragile that empire truly was. The shift didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened in Daniel's apartment. That night, he wasn't the confident heir to a corporate empire. He was restless, distracted. His tie lay discarded on the couch, sleeves rolled up like he had been fighting something invisible. They're hiding things from me, he said finally. I stood near the kitchen counter, quietly listening. My father keeps saying it's temporary pressure. But numbers don't lie. He ran a hand through his hair. We're stretched thin. If this next investment round fails. He didn't finish the sentence. Collapse hung in the air. I stepped closer. Have you asked him directly? He laughed bitterly. In my family, asking direct questions is seen as weakness. That told me everything. He wasn't part of the strategy. He was part of the image. For the first time since I had met him, I saw the weight he carried, not as a son, but as a successor expected to fix what he hadn't broken. He looked at me then, vulnerability replacing pride. If everything disappeared tomorrow, he asked quietly, if the company fell apart, would you still marry me? There it was. Not a test of loyalty. A plea for certainty. I didn't hesitate. Yes. Because that was the only part of the story that wasn't strategic. I loved him. Not the estate. Not the name. Not the illusion of power. Him. He exhaled slowly, tension easing from his shoulders. Sometimes I feel like I'm just a piece on their chessboard. I understood that feeling too well. The difference was I had chosen to play the game. He had been born into it. I stepped closer and took his hand, then stopped being a piece. He searched my face, as if trying to read something deeper. You're stronger than they think, I added softly. What I didn't say was this. And so am I. That night changed something between us. It wasn't about wealth anymore. It wasn't about image. It was about truth. He was starting to see cracks in his family's perfection. And soon, he would see the full picture. The only question left was whether that revelation would break him or set him free. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 in the morning. I made sure to arrive at 9:55. This time, there was no soft beige dress. No understated innocence. I wore a tailored charcoal suit, structured and sharp. My hair was sleek, my heels deliberate, my expression composed. When the elevator doors opened to the executive floor of the Callaway corporate headquarters, every step echoed differently. Not uncertain, authoritative. The conference room doors were already closed. Inside, Daniel's father and senior executives were presenting to a small group of potential investors. My investors. The assistant outside looked confused when I gave my name, not the one they knew socially, but the one listed as managing director of Arden Capital Holdings. Her eyes widened slightly. She opened the door. The room went quiet. Daniel's father stopped mid-sentence. His mother, seated near the end of the table as a board member, turned slowly in her chair. Daniel looked from me to the nameplate in front of my seat, to me again. I walked in calmly, my legal advisor and CFO behind me. "Good morning," I said, voice steady. "Apologies for the delay." No one spoke. I took my seat at the head of the investor side of the table. The same family that had once measured my worth at a dinner table was now waiting for my evaluation. Daniel's father cleared his throat. "You're representing Arden Capital?" "I am," I replied. "Majority stakeholder." Silence deepened. His mother's composure cracked first. "We weren't aware that Arden was reviewing your restructuring proposal?" I finished gently. "Yes. I prefer to operate quietly." Daniel's eyes held something between shock and realization. All the pieces were clicking into place. I opened the presentation folder in front of me. "We've reviewed your projections. There are concerns regarding liquidity exposure in Q3 and asset overvaluation in 2 subsidiaries. Professional, direct, controlled. No humiliation, just facts." For the first time since I had entered their world, they weren't looking down at me. They were looking up. And the most powerful part? I wasn't there to destroy them. I was there to decide whether they deserved saving. Underestimation had brought us to this moment. Now, respect would have to be earned. The silence in the conference room felt heavier than any insult I had endured before. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile smugly. Power doesn't need theatrics. Daniel's father adjusted his cufflinks, a subtle sign of discomfort. His mother sat unnaturally still, her expression carefully neutral. For years, they had controlled every room they entered. Now, they were waiting for my decision. I clicked to the next slide. "Arden Capital is prepared to offer structured bridge financing," I said calmly. "However, it will require asset transparency, board restructuring, and independent oversight during the recovery phase." There it was. Not revenge. Accountability. One of the executives shifted in his chair. "Those are strong conditions." "They're necessary," I replied. "Your leverage ratio leaves little margin for error." Daniel hadn't spoken yet. His eyes stayed on me, not angry, not betrayed. Awake. His father leaned forward. "You could have disclosed this earlier." I agreed. "But your family seemed concerned about suitability. I wanted to be sure my presence wasn't inappropriate." The words were gentle. The meaning wasn't. His mother finally spoke. "So, this was a test?" "No," I said evenly. "This is business." And that was the difference. They had tested me socially. I was evaluating them professionally. Daniel cleared his throat. "Are these terms negotiable?" I met his gaze. "Only if transparency becomes mutual." It wasn't about control. It was about balance. The documents were passed across the table. My legal advisor outlined timelines. My CFO detailed performance benchmarks. Daniel's father read carefully this time. No dismissal. No superiority. Just calculation. Finally, he signed. The pen made a quiet sound against paper, but it echoed louder than any insult from the past weeks. When the meeting ended, people stood slowly, tension easing. His mother approached me, expression restrained. "You're impressive," she admitted. Not warm, not apologetic, but real. Daniel walked beside me toward the elevator. You didn't crush them, he said quietly. I didn't need to. Because true power isn't about humiliation. It's about restraint. And in that room, the real test wasn't whether I could save their empire. It was whether I would. Now they understood something important. I had never been beneath them. I had simply been waiting. That night, everything felt different. Not because contracts had been signed. Not because power had shifted. But because the masks were finally gone. Daniel and I sat on the balcony of his apartment, the city lights stretching endlessly beneath us. The silence between us was intense. It was heavy with unspoken thoughts. He broke it first. You planned this, he said quietly. Not accusing. Just processing. I prepared. I corrected gently. He gave a soft exhale, almost a laugh. You let them underestimate you. Yes. And you let me. That one stung a little. I turned toward him. I didn't lie to you. But you didn't tell me everything. No, I admitted. Because I needed to know something first. He watched me carefully. What? If you loved me without knowing what I could offer. The words hung in the air. For weeks, I had been watching his family measure worth in assets and alliances. I needed to be sure he wasn't doing the same, even unconsciously. He leaned back in his chair, staring out at the skyline. You thought I might choose differently if I knew? He asked. I didn't know what you would choose, I answered honestly. And that scared me. Silence again, but this time softer. He turned back to me, eyes steady. I was angry at first. In that boardroom. Not because you had power, but because I realized how blind I'd been. Blind. I grew up thinking strength looked like my father. Control. Dominance. Strategy. He shook his head lightly. Today I saw another version. And what was that? Strength that doesn't need to prove itself. That mattered more than any apology from his family. He reached for my hand. I don't care how much you own. I care that you stayed. I squeezed his fingers gently. I didn't stay for the empire. I know. For the first time since I stepped into his world pretending to be smaller, I didn't feel like I was playing a role anymore. There were no hidden files. No strategic silence. Just two people standing at the edge of truth. And sometimes, that's more powerful than any boardroom victory. People often mistake quiet for weakness. They assume that soft voices belong to fragile minds. That simple clothes hide simple ambition. That humility means dependency. But what they don't understand is this. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one who says the least. I walked into the Callaway mansion pretending to be smaller than I was. I let them measure me with their assumptions. I let them believe I was lucky to be chosen. I let them speak freely, think freely, judge freely. Because when people believe you have nothing to offer, they reveal everything about themselves. Money didn't expose them. Pressure did. Respect didn't come when they thought I was kind and harmless. It came when they realized I could walk away or hold their future in my hands. But here's the truth that matters most. Power wasn't the point. Revenge wasn't the goal. Clarity was. I needed to know who Daniel truly was beneath his family's expectations. I needed to see whether love in that house was conditional or real. And in the end, the greatest victory wasn't signing contracts or watching expressions change in a boardroom. It was knowing I didn't lose myself while playing the game. Underestimation can be painful, but it can also be a gift. Because when people show you how small they think you are, you get to decide how big